Hey guys, Ron here, doing what I love. Um, I've actually done the subject, I've shown you tonight's subject, Jim Morrison. I've shown you his home up in Laurel Canyon, one of his homes before. But tonight, this is just going to be a little discussion about what the hell really happened to Jim Morrison. Again, we're going to speculate, but his death at age 27, just like Janice, just like Jimmy, and in the same year too. Well, the other two were at least, I think Janice was in 70. Jimmy might have been in 71 also, but I think he was 72. But between 70 and 71, three deaths of three famous, outstanding rock and rollers. Jim Morrison's death was very mysterious, somewhat mysterious. Some even say he faked his death. But I want to talk about that tonight, mainly because, and this is going to be a discussion video, I'm among the boats today again. I was out on Venice Beach today, or close to Venice Beach, but I didn't have all that much time out at Venice Beach after Jim Morrison met Ray, or when he met with Ray Manzarek on Venice Beach, and first read Ray Jim's lyrics, told him about doing poetry, read his lyrics to what would become the song Moonlight Drive, and I thought this will be a great place to do it, but I wanted to do some more research. Here come some people, always happens to me. I wanted to do some more research first on my subject, and now I'm back here to report it to you guys. Well, they look very surprised. Let's check them out. Oh yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Jim Morrison. Let's talk about Jim Morrison's final day, actual day, and some of the events that were leading up to his self-destruction. And then we'll go from there, and I'll show you the sites. It's interesting too, because one of the things I found out in my research, that in the weeks or even months leading up to Jim Morrison, including his very last day, he was having showing some symptoms that looked like a lot of the things John Belushi was doing on his last day. Spitting up blood at times, racking, coughing fits. But actually Morrison had them for longer than Belushi. I think both men had some kind of pulmonary situation that was going on, and it was really bad, and it might have been heroin related. Certainly wasn't John Belushi's case. Was it Morrison's case? That's the big mystery. So let's talk about it. So we all know Jim Morrison was the singer for the Doors. He came from a military family. His father was very high up in the Navy. That's where he got the song The Blue Bus from. That was related to the Navy. They moved, I think, 9 times in like the first 13 years or so of Jim's life. His father was a strict disciplinarian. Jim rebelled and wanted to rebel from an early age. In fact, on his bio for his first, I believe for the record deal, he put his biography, he put his parents were dead. And when Jim's mother contacted in '67 his management and tried to get a hold of where Jim was staying, and he was staying always different places, he asked them, don't ever tell them again where I am. He wrote them off and acted like they were dead, which is odd in and of itself. But no judgment here, just an opinion. So he wrote his parents off. He was always very rebellious, self-destructive. Some say that Jim Morrison's life changed forever when he was 4, and that's when all the bad stuff came in. When Jim was 4 years old, his family was driving in the Southwest, I believe in New Mexico, and they witnessed a terrible accident, and there were Native Americans from that accident literally laying dead by the side of the road. And Jim either said, or some speculated, that one of the shaman's spirits came into Jim, and that screwed him up forever, emotionally, mentally. You can make what you want of that theory. But Jim had a rebellious streak, and as the short number of years that the Doors were famous, were a band from '67 to the very end of 1970, Jim was monumentally famous. I actually do have a familial connection to the Doors. I won't say which one, but one is my second cousin. Yeah! But that doesn't mean too much, because the guy is obviously much, much older than me. He went to my sister's Sweet 16 party. There's actually pictures of that. They're closer and much closer in age than I am. She's probably old enough to be my father, a young father, but a father of mine. Anyway, so that being said, um, so we know about the Doors, we know about Jim's poetry, we know about the antics on stage, and we know also that Jim was what now would be called, pretty much a raging alcoholic. Jim did drugs, but his drug of choice was alcohol. Now, some say that, and I'm hearing this over and over about different people, that when he drank, Jim could be fine. You hear this again, like I say, you hear this. He could be okay sober, and he would drink, and become a different person. Was he actually allergic to alcohol? They didn't know about that in the late 60s, but they certainly know about that now. Perhaps because a personality change really would happen to him. David Cassidy claims that his ex-wife and then late wife, I don't know if the divorce ever went through, but David Cassidy claimed that his wife Sue and even the kids would claim that his whole personality changed when he was intoxicated, and he said he didn't recognize it himself, but he said that's what they say. So Morrison really would change dramatically, and since so many people fight when they're drunk and get either really emotional or violent or hostile or both, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's a lot more people that have such an adverse reaction to alcohol, even alcohol poisoning or alcohol, an allergy, that it really changes their personality in dangerous ways. But it's not anything I'm familiar with, so I can't speak at all from firsthand experience. So I'm just going by the research I've done. So as the 67, 68, and 69 went on, Jim was becoming more and more, had more and more objection to being a quote-unquote glorified rock star. And there is speculation that the weight that Jim gained, particularly around 68, 69 into 70, and he did gain quite a bit of weight, grew a big bushy beard, gained a lot of weight. Part of it obviously was the amount of alcohol he was consuming, and maybe his metabolism was changing even in his mid-20s. I think he would have been really heavy had he gotten to his 30s, 40s, 50s, or even beyond. But that notwithstanding, some say that the change in his appearance was partially deliberate, that he just was totally uncomfortable in the, sex symbol status, and that he wanted to kind of cover up. So by 1969, Jim has gained a bunch of weight. He's got the big beard, and the big bushy beards are really in now, but even though a lot of the young guys had him in 69, it was still really hiding the face that so many women wanted to see all the time. And at a concert in Florida in 1969, Jim was actually charged with indecent exposure. Now, his road manager says absolutely positively Jim took off his shirt, and he had just been, I believe, to a performance of Hair the night before, the nudie musical, and that Jim was, saying, in the mood for everybody to take it off and get loose and get funky. So his road manager says, absolutely swears that Jim did not expose himself, took his shirt off, but the road manager, he says he himself prevented Jim, there's one of our friends, prevented Jim from taking his pants off. But that half the audience got naked. So that's interesting. The 60s were a pretty loose time, weren't they, folks? And, when you're stoned and drunk, I guess anything can happen. Again, you'd have to tell me. So, nonetheless, Jim was arrested for indecent exposure. And it was incitement. I don't know the actual charges, but it was serious. He was actually convicted. And he was supposed to do 6 months hard labor. Something that he absolutely, of course, was dreading and didn't want to do, and who can blame him? As it worked its way through the court system, and it took a long time to do so. So finally, in November of 1970, the Doors ended up giving their last performance, basically because Jim, at some point in the performance, took the mic stand and took it and just shoved it into the ground until it made an actual hole in the stage. and he stormed off stage. And John Densmore threw down his drumsticks and said, "Never again, I can't handle it, we're not touring anymore." So the Doors went back into the studio and continued to work on their sixth and final album, but it really didn't look like touring was going to happen, and they had become pariahs because of Jim's arrest and conviction. A lot of places would not host them to perform. Radio stations not playing their songs. I don't see how the Doors could have survived it. Boy, if they only knew that there was going to be something called rap in another 25 years. And they can get away with anything on stage or off stage. But anyway, in 1969, this is still considered, vile, repulsive behavior, and no one wanted to book them anymore. Jim was a loose cannon, and again, I guess we'd have to ask somebody who was at the concert and remembers. The bandmates said they didn't know. Did Jim expose himself to the audience? Who knows? Okay, so anyway, the fallout from that was the group was operating in a really poor way, and a couple months after that December 69 performance, Jim relocates to Paris, and his feeling is, number one, get away from, maybe he would have stayed. I don't know what the extradition laws in France are, but I don't know whether he would have evaded arrest if he would have stayed in France. He also said it was a good place to recharge, do his poetry. He self-published a book of poems, which he gave out to friends, I should say, and I don't know if the press got a hold of it, but apparently some did, and the reviews were not glowing. So he was down about that. He could just, maybe start all over again. Not start all over again, but now that he had money, he could live in Paris fairly well and see what happened to his life. Now, he was with Pam Curson, his on-again, off-again girlfriend. In fact, they lived together in this flat they had in Paris. And Pam and Jim had been on again and off again since they had met in 1966. But she kind of was always the primary love of his life. The problem is that most of the people, and this is again anecdotal, most of the people around Jim and Pam did not like Pam Curson. She was a heroin addict. She had trouble with the law. They thought that she was a very bad influence on Jim, among other things. And as I said, see, here's where it gets cloudy and misty, and only the people who know either aren't alive anymore or won't say. But the common wisdom is that booze was Jim's drug of choice. Of course, he did LSD, but LSD is not going to kill you. Now, Jim's personal bodyguard, for lack of a better term, said that the bodyguard, was very anti-smack, very anti-heroin. And he said he spent a lot of time when if people would bring heroin around Jim, he said he made it clear that somebody's going to get hurt if they bring heroin around Jim. This is what the guy says. So his claim is that he tried to keep Jim away from hard, possibly lethal drugs. Okay. However, Jim is going with a heroin addict, a heroin user, if not an addict. On the last day of Jim's life, he had shaved the beard. He had actually lost a little weight, and there are pictures from that day. Because Jim was hanging out in Paris that day with a friend of his named Alain Resnais. And Alain Resnais was a guy that Jim had known before his rock and roll days. He had known him from film school, I believe at UCLA. Now, I believe that Alain Resnais was now living in, I think he was Parisian. I think he was living in, and I may be mispronouncing his name, and I assume that's a French name, Alain Resnais. But the two guys were hanging out that day. Alain Resnais came over to Jim's flat around 11 in the morning, and he said he really wanted to get Jim out and about. So they went out, they shopped in boutiques, they had wine and a lunch, I believe. They were out for a few hours until Resnais had another appointment. He had to meet another friend. But what's telling about it is that when Renee was with people, and I'm going to pause as these people go by. So when Elaine Renee was with Morrison that very last day, he said that there were a number of physical ailments that Jim was having that were very odd. And I believe he coughed and spit up some blood even that day. But that had been going on, evidently, according to Pam Curson, for a while. Which, when you're spitting up blood, you should see a doctor. Anyway, now, was this years of alcohol abuse? Was this pneumonia? Was this something worse or else? Who knows? But Elaine Renee said that Jim was... He said several times during their visit, Jim actually got racked with physical spasms, and that he had repeated hiccup attacks, and the hiccups were getting worse throughout the day, the attacks. And of course Jim kept saying he was okay, but physical spasms that would, kind of stop him in his tracks. In fact, when they got back to the apartment at some point during the day, Jim wanted to bring up firewood, which is also odd because it was the middle of July, or early July, but he couldn't even make it up the top of the stairs he was out of breath. He was having these spasms again. He was having these weird diaphragm type issues. I guess it's your diaphragm, when he was having these hiccup attacks. So he was not doing well, but he convinced, I don't know how much he drank that day, but he convinced Renee that he was okay. Enough. Renee leaves at some point in the early evening, saying he's got to meet another friend. Jim heads back. Oh, and at one point during the day, Jim bought Jim lived in a Bohemian Jewish neighborhood in Paris, and he stopped in. It was probably a Judaica store, and he bought a gold, either a high or a Star of David. I believe it was a Star of David for Pamela, which is interesting. Neither one of them was Jewish, but I guess he liked the jewelry, and he had some money, and he bought it for her. So later on that evening, and I'm remiss, I don't know the events of the early evening, other than to say that at some point, Pamela wakes up on the couch, still high from the heroin or still, under the influence of the heroin that she had done that evening. And this is her story. She says that then Jim says he wants to go take a bath. She says she's going to sleep. Jim proceeds to the bathroom, to get in the tub, and then she later finds him. Now, when the paramedics arrive, they said that the water in the bathtub was lukewarm, so he hadn't obviously been in there all that much, and that his skin seemed warm, so they didn't know if he was alive or dead. He wasn't cold to the touch. However, then they later said that he was only warm because of the bath water being warm. Now, for some reason, they concluded that it was like a heart attack, heart failure, heart attack at 27 years old, and there was no autopsy performed. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I don't believe there's ever an autopsy. It was just sort of a rush to judgment thing. Now, did Jim Morrison just have a heart attack at 27? I mean, we know I've described to you the physical ailments he was having throughout the day, but was that enough to kill him that night? There's a rumor, there was of course conspiracy theories, and we'll see what you think about this. And one conspiracy theory, I didn't see it in my recent research, but I had seen it interviews before with people that say that there was a nightclub in Paris, and these people were saying that Morrison went to the nightclub, did heroin himself, whether he was picking some up for Pamela, or whether he was alone and doing it, whether he was with her and doing it, but that he did heroin. He OD'd in the club, possibly in the bathroom of the club. A lot like River Phoenix, although River Phoenix lived till he got out on the sidewalk. That he had OD'd in the bathroom of the club, and that the club didn't want the bad publicity. Took Jim home, put him in the bathtub. Don't know. Some people also say that Pamela called her dealer before she called the paramedics, and that she was advised by the dealer to excuse me, to get rid of all the drugs in the apartment. And supposedly this dealer hightailed it off to somewhere out of the country to lay low, should there be an investigation. So I think it's very strange. Obviously, people still make the pilgrimage to Jim's grave. Was it a heroin overdose? Did he OD in a club? And did the club owners dump him in the bathroom? And, to make it look like, just to get him out of there? Did Pamela somehow not want people to know that maybe she had given the heroin to Jim and that she might be charged with a crime like Kathy Smith was for injecting John Belushi? Was it bad heroin? Supposedly the batch of heroin that killed Janis Joplin was part of a batch that had been circulating in Los Angeles that weekend. Now it's, bad fentanyl. Then it was like bad heroin. So I'd really be interested in see what you guys think. It's interesting any way you look at it. What really happened to Jim Morrison? Did he suddenly die of a heart attack in the bathtub at 27? Or did he OD in a club or at home? Or, I don't know, was he murdered? I don't think that one's come across. Who knows? Doesn't seem likely to me, but you never know. All right, folks. Well, this is Ron doing what I love to do. If you like the channel, please do subscribe. If you do subscribe, hit the little bell icon next to the subscription button. Then you'll be notified when I post. And please give likes. I really appreciate it. If you want to give a constructive comment, please do so. If you're just giving a nasty, weird comment or something that is not pertinent, don't bother, because I'll let it go for a while. But if it's really heinous, I'll just block you. Anyway, I don't get much. Well, not even 1% of comments are like that, but I think I might as well say that, because when I give a comment to somebody, if I give a comment on the page, I give a constructive, educated, thoughtful comment. It may not always be a positive comment, but I might give constructive advice or criticism, but I would never say, you're an idiot or you do this. So anyway, why am I talking about this? It doesn't matter, because I don't get those, really. All right, folks. I'll see you guys next location. Let's take one with the boats here. It's another beautiful night. It's about 64 degrees in the middle of summer. Really nice. Okay, guys, we'll see you at the next location. Ron out. Thank you. Bye-bye.